So what I want to start with is you produce this new record yourself. Now, I read somewhere that as a teenager, you already dabbled in kind of recording yourself and those kind of things. Did it remind you, or what do you remember of those days?
Maybe it reminded me. Yeah. I mean, the thing is that recording technology has changed so radically since the 90s. So,
Sure.
I had a 4-track cassette based kind of affair. I mean, I had the one where I had no, there wasn't, I don't even think it had an EQ. It had nothing, no treble, no bass, and then, like so many people probably that had the home, this is, I don't know how many people are interested in this conversation, but I started with a 4-track, and then I got a reel-to-reel machine, an 8-track, like a half-inch 8-track reel-to-reel. And I think I wanted to get involved in the mini disc. I was a big mini disc fan. Managed to not get involved in that. And then eventually, obviously, we all got computers. And so I actually felt like I kind of mixed quite well when things were analog, when I had a desk, like and an 8-track, and had to bounce everything down and make decisions. And so, yeah, I've always felt like I sort of had something then, and then now, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's different. It is different today. So I guess, yeah, I suppose it's always in there. Whatever you learn as a teenager is always there somewhere.
Do you still have some of those recordings?
Yeah, they were
Those
my
early
greatest.
recordings?
It's my greatest work, never released.
No, because obviously the technology has changed and your skill has changed. You're not the same person you were back then. But I can imagine that kind of the idea was there, the idea of putting yourself to tape or
Yeah, I mean, there's also there's a disease that we have in the musicians called demo-itis as well. There's always a vibe that seems to be there on a certain demo, a scratchy kind of thing. That, I mean, this is the magic, what can we do? So I mean, actually, there were some songs that I recorded on 4-track and on 8-track that really I kind of felt were the ones. And if I'd had a bit more courage, I would have just released those, But we sort of smooth some of the edges, and we ended up doing something different. But yeah, definitely, I still have those recordings in my heart.
Okay. So if we move to Meanwhile, then your new album, what was the demoing process like? Was that a short period? Was that kind of a very concise thing during lockdown? How did kind of this process go?
Yeah, well, there was about half of the record that I'd written before we went into lockdown, maybe a little more than half. And yeah, I mean, in this situation, the demo process seamlessly just became the recording process, on account of the fact that we weren't able to sort of go into a studio. I mean, I can remember walking around where I live now in North London, trying to find somewhere for everybody to stand in a room and record this thing. But the demos ended up kind of seamlessly sort of becoming the recordings. So, yeah, it was kind of pretty straightforward, really, in that sense.
In that sense, was it by necessity that you produced the entire album?
Well, yes, to some extent, but also I kind of, wanted to do it myself as well. So it was sort of the guy that I've used for 4 albums before that, Tristan, he, actually wasn't able. It turns out his partner was at home working and everything like that, and he's recording at home as well. So, it became a kind of difficult thing to actually go to his studio and work during that period. And I also kind of thought, oh, do you know what? I'm a grown up now. I kind of know what I'm doing. If I just, my partner jokingly says to me, in order to become a producer, you say you're a producer. That's, and there seems to be a lot of that in a lot of businesses and a lot of things. You just have to say you are one, So, I kind of had the skills and I just needed to be pushed out of the nest, So it was a bit of everything.
What is it like to listen to yourself objectively, or to try to listen to yourself objectively?
Painful. Yeah, I mean, it's impossible. I mean, some of the best situations for me is when I find or stumble across a recording that I'd forgotten about. Excuse me, sneezing. I've been hoovering, just so you know, man. I'm doing everything. I'm doing the domestic stuff as well. So sometimes on iTunes or something like that, on my library, I'll find a song that I'd forgotten that I'd written. So there's almost like this sort of magic moment where, oh, here's a song with a guy singing, and that's so you could, for a sort of split second, you can have a real, truly objective sense of, I quite like this. It's all right, or whatever. But yeah, generally speaking, objectivity is impossible.
With that in mind, then, what was the kind of the foundation for what would become Meanwhile? Were there certain songs, or was there something you were looking for sonically? Well, where did the foundation start?
Yeah, I kind of had the idea initially that I was going to do a really acoustic kind of, I talked about, in my own mind, talked about Springsteen's Nebraska, which is a really kind of, moody kind of hymn with just a tape machine thing. So I kind of had a few things at the beginning, and funny enough, when COVID came, I thought, oh my God, I can't bring people down. I can't make it this dark. I have to bring some other things into this sound. So things kind of evolved at that moment, and I think it changed everybody's sort of mentality anyway. And it ended up becoming whatever it is now, which is I suppose a kind of hybrid of sort of stripped down acoustic stuff and more arranged material.
What made you go towards more darker music initially?
You mean for this record, or just generally?
Specifically for this record, because as you say, it went down kind of that Nebraska route, but then it changed. But initially, what was that? Was that a reflection of your mood or the time?
Yeah, I think that the truth was I was probably in that place at the beginning, and as the time went on, lockdown aside, I sort of did, find a bit more center ground with my mood and with my outlook, and I kind of just, I suppose, it just expressed the feeling. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's make it a bit more concrete then, because for instance, I would imagine songs like Can't Hold Back the Sun and Hold On, those are the type of songs that came then later to kind of counterbalance a little bit.
Well, yeah, the interesting thing, the Can't Hold Back the Sun was absolutely, smack bang in the middle of the first lockdown, but the lyrics to Hold On I wrote before COVID, and then it sort of had a different resonance suddenly when COVID came along. Everybody's, doing exactly that. So, but I'm trying to think Western Shore was written in lockdown as well. We're all kind of stuck at home and want to get away from, but yeah, Can't Hold Back the Sun. Absolutely. That was definitely lockdown.
Because is there a big difference for you between the songs that you've written before lockdown and kind of during?
Probably, yeah. I guess the truth of the matter is I'm probably looking outwards a lot more, maybe on the, well, I don't know whether you say outwards, but it's all the same really, isn't it? Inwards and outwards. You're kind of, but yeah. I would say there's a difference. Yeah.
Well, for instance, let's talk about Looking for the Light, because that sounds like a song that would be written early on in the lockdown when kind of things are slowed down and you're reflecting more and looking back a little bit more, or at least that is what happened to a lot of people. So how did that song come together?
Yeah, I think at this particular moment, or whatever it's been, couple of years probably in the writing process, I think I have been doing a lot of, looking at, I suppose I'm getting to my age or whatever now. It's sort of, I don't know if you call it a midlife crisis or something, but it's almost like there was a moment to sort of look back and kind of reflect on, it feels almost as if at this point in my life I've come back to the beginning again, almost to ground zero. That people talk about this sort of ego, shedding your ego thing. I definitely feel like this is what's happened to me in these years, where I kind of feel that vulnerability that I felt when I was young. I feel like, I don't really know what the hell's going on. So I think, the Looking for the Light thing is absolutely kind of about that, and about just kind of trying to recalibrate and find the way again.
When you wrote that song, was there a specific time in your life you thought back to, kind of because you mentioned youth and kind of that. So was there a specific time that you were thinking about?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I moved around a lot when I was a kid. I moved away. I lived in a small town village in the south, and I moved when I was 7. So that was kind of one of the things sort of started to kind of get a bit more chaotic, and it carried on for a few years. So maybe that kind of 7-year-old before they kind of moved, maybe that kind of version of the world that sort of made sense in a small way was probably the one I was going back to.
Because, well, you mentioned kind of when the world made sense, and then one thing that I wrote down is there is some mention of kind of feeling lost and some demons that are surrounding you. Does writing about those things, does that help you?
I think so. You'll have to ask my therapist. No, I mean, I think so. I think it helps. I mean, it's certainly. Yeah, it's a catharsis. It helps. I mean, I'm trying to ask myself that question very critically, like I'm asking a load of other questions, about is this a healthy, there's always a balance to be struck, you know what I mean, in terms of how much you remember and how much you forget and how deep you look. If you look into the abyss long enough, the abyss looks back, that expression. So I think, I'm trying to get the balance right, but I think the being able to go there is a good thing, and actually being able to let, if this is part of letting go, and then if it's part of going forward, then yes. So I hope. The answer is I hope it's good for me. I'm making a living from it, so it's financially.
Well, yeah, exactly. So in one way or another, it works out for you.
Yeah.
Well, it kind of that reminds me of something as well, which I suppose for a musician is the last year has been quite strange because there has been no touring. Kind of your job has been decimated in a way. And there's a line in Western Shore, if I'm brave enough to live an ordinary life. Now, I found that thought really interesting because I read a book once about embracing the ordinary, about kind of not looking for or appreciating the ordinary things in life. So how do you look at you being home and kind of living this ordinary life now?
Yeah, it's good. I'm enjoying it. We're all trying to live an ordinary life, I think, right now, and trying to kind of focus on the small things and, take a walk, think about lunch, whatever, try and feel kind of as free as we can feel at this moment. But no, I mean, I think that idea is particularly important to me, especially doing what I do. There's this, it is a very unordinary life, even at the level that I'm at, it's kind of, there's a lot of ways that you can escape reality. You can, the whole thing about traveling and touring is completely like a bubble of it can be, I suppose, good in a certain way where you're kind of, it has a certain romance to it where the road is going by you and you're kind of floating above everything, but ultimately it's totally not real in a way. There's no, somebody's feeding you and all of these things. And so I think the idea about living an ordinary life is actually quite an aspiration. I think there's a huge danger that you're always looking externally for the answer or the kind of fix or the kind of next thing. And actually, if you can just focus on the ordinary and the kind of simple, I mean, I say ordinary in a good way. Do you know what I mean?
Sure,
the ordinary
sure.
as in kind of simple, then I think there's a lot to be said for that, so yeah, I think that's kind of one of the sort of revelations that I've had, definitely.
And obviously, you've been in this business for a while now. Well, it kind of reminds me of another line, then, but I'm not sure if I will be able to find it quickly. But it kind of is something along the lines that your dreams haven't changed. So when you kind of got into the music industry and where you are now, do you kind of feel the same about it, or has your ambitions changed in a way?
I think when we're young, when we're kids, we kind of have very simple ways of looking at things. I mean, I just looked at my musical heroes and I just basically just wanted what they had. I didn't kind of take all the component parts of like, there's music and credibility as a musician, and there's fame and there's celebrity. I just sort of thought, okay, those people are A, selling records, B, also famous, bloody blah. And I kind of, everything was all together. I never thought, oh, it's not too great to be famous, actually. Just, it would be great to just be a successful musician or whatever. Now I'm kind of feel quite lucky in a way that I'm not, famous, or haven't been that particularly famous, where I don't know if how strong I'd be to deal with that. But so certainly that was one thing that I've kind of figured out, that, oh my God, okay, there's actually a lot of downsides to the whole thing. In terms of ambitions, I think we all have to kind of, adjust ourselves, to kind of whatever life's going to throw at you at my particular age and everything, and trying to appreciate whatever success happens, and not get too, I don't know, torn up inside about the fact that somebody's doing better than you, or that you've got someone else has got 100,000 more Spotify listeners than you've got.
Right.
I think those are the kinds of things that you obsess about when you're in your 20s, and hopefully you can just try and enjoy, smell the coffee and all that kind of stuff.
In a similar sense, do you have certain creative ambitions still? Because I imagine you would, otherwise you wouldn't be releasing records. But in a sense, do you have certain things that you still want to do creatively? Yeah,
I mean, I'm still, haven't made the perfect album yet. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, I somehow feel like, and I don't know whether this is the truth or not, or whether I'm being honest with myself, but I almost feel like sometimes I wish I could be more true, do you know what I mean, to whatever I truly want, and so I think it's, I mean, this is a weird example, but there's a guy, I mean, you probably know Robbie Williams, right?
Sure.
There was a point where he was kind of saying, I really hate the music that I make, kind of thing. I really hate kind of, and sometimes I feel like, it's very difficult to be honest about who we truly are. When we make art, when we make, a piece of work, we've nailed our colors to the mast. We've said, okay, here is me, right? And a lot of people they don't have to do that. They don't have to go, okay, this is me. They can just say they are this. I'm this guy. I like these clothes. I like this. I like to go to this holiday destination or whatever. So, I love, a lot of the artists that I, admire and respect, from that I consider very credible, but, there's also an accessibility that I love as well. But I'd like maybe just to make it out and out, maybe singer-songwriter record, that is not necessarily, I don't know if I'm making any sense here with what I'm saying.
No, I find it interesting because you mentioned earlier on that this new album, meanwhile, perhaps you've been the most vulnerable on. So would you say this is kind of the closest you've gotten to what you truly think or truly feel?
I mean, when I actually really look at, what am I really looking at? It's kind of, I mean, maybe it's a bad thing to talk about, trying to, think about radio and things like that. But, it's those elements where you're trying to, I mean, for instance, I'm doing another version of the Hold On song. I've got another version of it, which is a bit more of an acoustic kind of, Dylan-esque kind of thing. And maybe I might have gone that way with it, but I thought, okay, this, I could actually make this into a radio song, So it's those kinds of things where, because I've had success, it's not like I dislike what I came up with, but it kind of, it forces you, it's like another guy that comes into the room and goes, hey, wait a minute, John, you should really think, I've either literally got that guy, or I've got that guy on my shoulder telling me that. So I think because a lot of my success has come through radio and things like that, it's sort of like, I'm like the junkie that needs to kind of check, go back to it a little. So, I think if I can, to keep trying to sort of follow my own, just be really selfish about it and do what I want.
But I would imagine, do you do that for yourself, or is it when you write songs, it's definitely with the aim to release it?
Oh, it's always, I mean, at this stage, it is with the aim to release it. I mean, yeah. I mean, maybe this, I guess there might be things that I've written that I don't particularly want to release, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of like just the way that it works. There's always kind of one shiny one that you kind of go, okay, well, here's the other things that are kind of, they can sit and they can be unmessed with. And there's always a kind of shiny kind of shop front one that you put out there, you know, and there's always that there's always a slight tension between those two kinds of songs, you know. I think that's what I'm really talking about.
Well, it's interesting as well because you employed two old friends of yours, Adam and Dan, to help you with the record, and I believe also Luke Bullen, who played drums. So is it difficult for you then, in a sense, to give some of that control away?
Well, in this situation, I probably had more control than ever. Right. Less to give away. But I mean, with Luke, he was a sort of, you know, session drummer vibe. So it was sort of sending over the tracks, and I mean, his ego is super under control as a drummer. You know, he's not kind of like, you know, kind of like a million toms or whatever. You know, he's kind of super restrained as a player, and. Yeah, I mean, to Adam and Dan were two guys that I was at college with, and Adam did the string arrangements on How Long and on Blame It All on Me, and his brother mixed, basically just kind of, I handed it over to him to go, well, this is what I've got, and he kind of just, you know, fixed a few things EQ wise, a little bit of brightness, and kind of gave me the slight, you know, took away the fear slightly, so it was good. It was good.
Okay. Well, there's one last thing that I want to talk to you about, which is Cruel World. And I wrote a line down from there. Got no faith in my feelings. They've betrayed me before. My heart is full of stories I don't believe anymore. What kind of mindset were you in when you wrote that song?
Yeah, I mean, I think it maybe taps into some of the stuff that we've talked about before about, you know, the narrative that we have. We all have a story that we tell ourselves, and you know, you just kind of lose faith at a certain point, and so that's kind of what that was about. But yeah, I mean, I used to be really kind of anti-religion, you know. I used to be really sort of, you know, quite patronizing to people that had that, you know, to have a faith sort of thing. And then I actually realized, no, we've all got our box of stories that we carry around with us. They may be from an old book or whatever, or they may be just some idea that we have, you know, that is not really, you know, it's just a story, you know. So I think I was just at a point where I was kind of shedding the ego, shedding the, you know, all the stories that kind of kept me going, you know, before were just, you know, they weren't working anymore.
In that sense then, what have you learned from this whole process of creating Meanwhile? It can be musically or personally, either way. God. Well, I suppose to have some faith, to go back to that, to have a bit of faith in my abilities to do things, and, you know, and also faith in life, and faith in, you know, in other people. And, you know, there is a probably in those 2 years, I've probably found some direction, and I've kind of found a few. What are those things that the mountain climbers you put in the mountain? Do you know what I mean? A few things. I know what you mean. I don't know what you call them.
A few of those things to get up the mountain. You know, exactly. A few hooks to get to hang on to. So, I think that's probably what this process has taught me.
Ah, that's great. Well, last question then. When did the title Meanwhile pop into your head?
It kind of came late, like a lot of things. I mean, funnily enough, I wanted to call the album Cruel World, and I was told not. It was like, John, come on, man, you're kidding. In this moment, you know, we don't need to be reminded, you know. So I got talked out of that, and I thought it was kind of a cool idea because, this pandemic is taking up everybody's headspace and everybody's bandwidth, and there's almost like no space for anything else. So this is, I thought, oh, well, meanwhile, there's a meanwhile, you got to get up in the morning. Meanwhile, maybe I'll write a song, maybe I'll do this. So it was that was kind of the idea behind it, that it was, we all have to kind of get on with something meanwhile this whole thing is going on.
And then I suppose that's to end on the line from Hold On, it won't always be this way.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I was actually trying to decide whether it will always be this way,
Okay.
they're kind of the same thing, aren't they? But yeah, I mean, it won't always be this way, I guess. Yeah, let's hope so.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Jon, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. And I hope all goes well with the record. And then I am optimistic and hopeful about the coming months and the world opening up again.
Thanks, man. Thanks a lot, dude. Good to talk to you. Yeah.